I will always feel an urgency, like I feel such an urgency every day, as I know our teachers and our leadership team, we feel an urgency every day to make a difference for our kids.
Why?
Because if we have limited time, and I know some people don't recognize that from pre-K through 12, it's so short, it's so brief. Like all of us, it's a blink of an eye, 1 minute we're little children, and the next minute, I'm this almost 51-year-old woman. How did that happen? That's how I feel the time flies, for the amount of educational time and influence you have on children, and that if it takes us 2 years to make a shift in an instructional model or a schedule, you're potentially missing the opportunity to provide those children who are in that gap period with what's going to make a difference in their life.
Right.
And that stresses me out because I recognize I need to hear what everyone's asking me to do on various sides of issues, and I'm watching these children who are sitting in our classrooms right this minute. So I feel a huge urgency, and I need to walk through listening well, and I need to be willing to and be open to changing my opinion about issues and next steps to take. And at the end of the day, you have to be willing to be courageous and take the step to make a decision and to move us forward, because we can all become frozen in like the myriad of opinions and conflicts, because it's so important. I mean, everything that's coming at you is so important because you're talking about children and their lives,
Right.
that you can almost become frozen and do nothing.
So a lot of people do. There are superintendents who do. They sit at their desk, they cross the T's, they dot the I's, and then that's it.
Right, they keep things afloat.
What's the hardest thing about your job?
The hardest thing about my job, it's never the kids, because that's why I do this work, because kids are these interesting, complicated human beings, and that's the easy part of the work. Very easy part. Not easy, they often present challenging situations, scenarios, things that we have to work on, but that's the part of the work that I love, and it's why I'm here. So kids are the easy part. I think some of the hardest parts of my job is me being an educator and wanting to focus on the work that I believe to be very important, which is what happens in our classrooms, what is that magic between the adults and the student, and what content and instructional strategies are we using. I want to spend my time there.
Yeah.
And the reality of a superintendent's job, to be able to, it's the struggle between being pulled to address issues that are sometimes, like, I'm not saying this well, but sometimes outside of that tangible work. So
it's almost like you have to explain what you're doing instead of spending more time just doing what you want to do.
Yeah, so part of it is I spend a lot of my time reporting to the state and federal government, addressing or taking requirements from others and trying to figure out how to make it work so that it's actually not hurtful to the classroom, and hopefully ideally helps.
Wow.
So there's that piece of the overlay.
So you have to do what the state and the federal government want you to do, but you also somewhere there's that between line where you're like, even though that's what the state requires, this might not actually all of it be useful to our community and our children.
Exactly.
So you have to figure out that in between space.
Yes.
It's
complicated.
It is complicated.
And there are often real either financial requirements or there are consequences to saying, no, we're not going to do this. So
there's
I have to
sometimes on both ends.
On all ends. So that's I find that hard.
That is hard.
I also find
because you care. That's why it's hard.
Yeah. I guess the bottom line is I would love to, because of who I am, spend my time really focusing on what I believe makes a difference for kids, which is that magic in the classroom.
And being with the kids.
Yeah. And the superintendent's job is that.
Yeah.
And addressing issues that come to me from other locations, like the state and federal government, of requirements. Also, the political nature of the job, which is listening and being really connected to the 4 communities that we serve, and trying to build relationships, which is important. But at times it pulls me from you know, working with kids. But it's critical.
Yeah.
The other piece is forever struggling with the lack of finances.
Yeah.
You know, the lack of financial resources coming to us and having to make tough trade-offs.
Yeah.
So I guess the real answer is that there's competing demands for where I focus my energy.
Yeah.
And all of the requests of me are important. And sometimes I'd like to spend more of my time in the classroom. I'm always excited by my work because it is innovative, challenging, it's system level change, which, well,
That's
some
huge.
people, I love it.
Yeah.
I love seeing a challenge and figuring out, working with other people to figure out solutions. I wish, of course, they were quicker, that you'd see results more quickly at times, but when we're talking about a large system, it takes some time. So I like the puzzle that is put in front of me routinely about how do you improve a system.
So stop right there. You said it takes some time. So sometimes people will go, oh, our superintendent's not doing anything, and this isn't happening,
sure.
this is not happening.
Yeah.
Why is that? Is it because they're not seeing the components that it takes to get to XYZ place, or?
Yeah, you know, I think what why that happens is that people feel the urgency that I feel.
Yeah.
You know, you care deeply about making a difference for children, and you know the cost of not getting or not making the improvement to the system, whether it's around improving maybe co-teaching in the classroom. Like, why are you not doing that? Where, you know, some kids are not benefiting. So people feel the urgency and as passionate about the issues as I
Especially
do.
about their own children.
Of course. I mean, we all do. They're our babies, and we're worried, and we see when things are not working. I mean, I have the same experience when it's my kids.
Yeah.
So I think we all feel, we feel the urgency. We want it done now. I think what's hard for people is that sometimes they may not see the steps that it takes to actually set up change to really become meaningfully.
That's a big word. To
Yeah.
make it sustainable.
Yeah, so
too.
that it actually happens. You know, you have to think about, we have, you know, pre-K through 12, we have about 1,000 adults that work in our system. And we have almost 3,000 kids. So, excuse me, almost every change we put in place, you have to think about the design, and you have to think about how am I going to frame why the change is essential. Because in schools, we are the social sector. We're not a hierarchical top-down business, which businesses you can say this is how you do it. If you don't do it, you're not producing X and you lose your job. So you have a much more defined hierarchical power dynamic, power structure. Schools were a social sector. So what that means is you need to really put out what is the mission. Why is the drive to make this change happen so important?
The why even, you just even have to chew on the why.
Yeah, and the why
and
is...
make sure it's backed up with data and, okay.
Absolutely, and sometimes the why is different, and the belief in the why is different because everyone has different values and priorities. So it has to be something that is so grounded in the importance for children that people say, oh my gosh, I see why we have to do that. You have to set up the why, then you have to set up so to make the why happen, what are the incremental steps you have to take? It's often, first of all, we need the materials. We need to have a level of professional development for staff so that they understand how to implement the strategy for the why. So if it means I'm going to ask you to teach something differently, you need to have a rollout plan that says, I'm going to have the materials, first of all, there's understanding of the why, people have bought in to the why as much as possible, or most of the group has bought in, because then people come along typically.
That's right.
What is the response if people don't come along?
That's right.
How do you respond to that? So it's a management issue. Right. And then you have to have, what is the professional development essential so that people know what you're talking about.
Make that change.
Yeah, so that people can see what you're asking them to do. And then how do you provide professional development? How do you provide support, reinforcement, ongoing development? Because it takes all of us a long time to really learn something, to have it be automatic. And then you have to make sure you monitor whether it's... So it's really...
That does take time. I just learned a lot right there, the way you explained that.
Well, you're shifting the culture of schools and how we do our work every time you put in place.
And you need board buy-in and community buy-in and
it
we
is
wanna make
always
changes.
ideal if you can have the community and the board,
But
the
the
school
community
committee
may be
understand.
divided in and of itself, right?
Yeah, and there's a different level of understanding at times because lots of people,
Yeah.
like in particular, I think in our community, there's a lot of educators.
Yeah.
So what it means to be an educator in one environment can be very different in a public school setting.
Yeah.
Because you may have different conditions for changing things. There are different structures. So, and I think at times too, people, don't like when we use jargon. I hear that a lot. But yet every profession has a language. You go to the doctor, not equating teachers with doctors, but every, if you go to a greenhouse or if you're doing something related to horticulture, there's a language associated with it. And sometimes because we're communicating with a broader community all the time, we have to consistently think about how you translate that understanding, that language. I'm forever feeling an urgency. There are some things that are very non-negotiable for me around safety and about meeting the needs of all kids. So in some cases, I describe it as ripping off the Band-Aid. So there are times when I make decisions that are very fast for the culture, and it doesn't allow for the full opportunity for buy-in for teachers. And I juggle routinely.
Every day.
I do, and I'm often sitting in a situation where I'm making someone really unhappy, and I'm making someone else really happy. And I'm okay with that if it's, I'd love it to be different, of course. But if it's what's best for kids, I can sit with that. So, and I try really hard. I think you could hear from the people who work directly with me. There's a high expectation, when we all have this high expectation and a high standard for our work. We expect a lot. And the timeline is often fairly abbreviated because we have a lot of work to do. So I feel that sometimes we teeter people on the edge, like my staff. It's like, how much progress can we make, but how much is too much? So it's always that, trying to be responsive to the system and how much it can absorb in a short period of time.
That's fascinating.
It's really hard, and it's really wonderful work. And you have to
if your heart's in the right place.
Oh, it has to be. Because otherwise, what could happen is if you are not focusing on children. It's a given that you're going to make different groups of people unhappy at different times. That's just the nature of.
But if you don't have the focus, you'll be everywhere.
If you're not focusing on children, because there are demands that come from all sides of all issues, and if you are going to sway in the wind, you're not going to go to sleep at night feeling okay about the decisions you've made because there's no anchor.
And you won't have any conviction, and you won't have, there will be no change with that kind of
So the kids are the anchor, and I think one of the things that we want to work on is a system becoming better able to hear the input of our kids, of our students, having student voice be much more prevalent in the decision making too. It sounds funny when you think, you're saying you're proud of your kids or impressed by, because it sounds like you're suggesting you shouldn't, because that's not what I mean. But I'm forever impressed by our students because they are really amazing human beings, and actually I find much more at times responsive and thoughtful because about an issue than sometimes we are as grown-ups, because we've lived longer lives and we're kind of really more set in our beliefs. They're so much more open to really hearing each other's perspectives, and so I think that's an untapped resource that schools, we all have to become better at.